Hey, good morning, world. It is Patrick Lovell coming at you on March 15th, 2023 at 9 a.m. my time. And yeah, I'm riffing these truth bombs, baby. And it was really an amazing day yesterday. And I'll tell you, I watched my truth bomb from yesterday a couple of times. And, I said a lot of the things that I wanted to say. And I did so fast and furious, and I got most of what I wanted to say correct. I made a couple of faux pas, but one of which was really funny. I thought it was, for some reason, Valentine's Day yesterday. I don't know why it popped into my head. Usually the way that I riff these truth bombs, is that I've got a lot going on like everybody else does, and so I don't script these. I don't, have a complete strategy. Obviously I'm not producing this with a bunch of cutaways to things that underscore my point, because if I did, I'd have budget to do it, and it would be a lot more involved, and I'd be working with a lot more people to bring these to you. What these are just stream of consciousness from my knowledge, from the work that I've been doing for a long time, very long time, which seems like an eye blink, to be honest with you, but yeah, it's been a long time, and I feel somewhat, I don't know, in a really cool Zen space today, as you might be able to tell from my tone versus yelling and shouting and getting super intense. But I'm incredibly validated. And I dare say, for the first time in a very long time, I'm actually happy, in a sense, because I can actually see the possibilities of what it is that I've been trying to manifest for some time. And it's like I'm seeing the doorway open up and the pathway take shape. And for somebody like myself, that's incredibly important. I feel like I've been banging my head against the wall and trapped in a maze, and some sort of disaster from hell, and being toyed by the devil and that sort of thing. And last night I said, to the Twitter world, I said, God, I wake up in the morning slam dancing corruption, and I go to bed slam dancing corruption. And I posted a picture. It's a great picture. And I was looking at all the faces of all these dudes from probably the 80s, and it just brought back so many memories to me, because I was that kind of guy. I was a skater, kind of a independent mod ska guy that went to punk rock shows, definitely did all sorts of crazy things. I mean, I've seen shows of every, you know, type you can possibly imagine, including a lot of dead shows, by the way. And that time period was just magnificent in my life. And I think back to my sort of outlook when I was like between 18 to 25ish, if you will, and particularly coming out of high school. And I remember, because I come from an upper middle class family, definitely not rich, by today's standards, which is really nauseating considering all the stuff we're talking about. But, definitely from a family of stability and of inspiration, and of my parents are incredible professionals that do things really right. So I knew how the world is supposed to work. But in high school and afterwards, money wasn't really the end game for me. I always kind of figured money would come eventually, but what was really important to me was knowledge. It was wisdom. It was traveling. It was adventure. It was experiencing the world. It was discovering what was important to me. And quite frankly, it was about partying, having a good time as well, right? And so I traveled a lot. I surfed a lot. I skateboarded all over the place. I snowboarded and skied and climbed mountains, and swam with crocodiles and sharks and all sorts of crazy shit, and dolphins. And I saw a good portion of the world, man. And eventually it led me to kind of reconfiguring where I wanted to go, because I always had a vision that I was either going to go to law school and follow in the shoes of my father, who was a corporate attorney, and either that, or follow my dream, which was to go to Hollywood and become a producer. And I chose the latter. I always remember my grandfather, by the way. He was always very inspiring to me. In fact, the most inspiring person I've ever known. And he would say things to me like, you've got to follow your North Star. And my North Star was to chase my dream in Hollywood and to become a producer. I didn't know it at the time that that the producer was where I fit. I thought I wanted to be a director and a screenwriter and all that kind of stuff. And I've experienced a lot of both, by the way. I've written like 20 spec scripts, and I've been involved with having my films stolen by the best. And that's one of the reasons why I can't stand liars, by the way. But that'll take me back to that's important for this morning's truth bomb, is that, look, we've got some momentum, we've got some mojo. People are starting to listen. Some of you out there are starting to understand that I have spent years and years and years as a producer, an investigative journalist, a muckraker journalist, somebody who has, because of my study and who I am and where I come from and my DNA and everything else, I believe in truth, justice, and liberty above all else. And I despise fascism above all else. But I also despise corruption right up there. And like I continue to say, corruption births fascism, but all of these things are sort of kind of like, ethereal concepts unless you can plug them into the matrix and the Borg and what it's all about. And I feel validated and calm at the moment because everything has validated me. Okay. And our efforts, quite frankly, and there was a team involved, but I was the guy who was always the driving force behind everything that we've done with the con at www.thecon.tv. And also please check out the new Untouchables if you're just tuning into me. And also I have just so many hours over the course of the last year on TikTok at Patrick Level Truth Bombs the Con. I think we've been viewed over 7 million times. And then on YouTube, of course, at Patrick Level Truth Bombs the Con. And there's some extremely important information there. But where we are at the moment was, and why yesterday was such an extraordinary day is that, a couple of just so many revelations of what I've been screaming about and frustrated by for a long time. Media is a complete failure. Media is an extension tool, communications device, a deceptive acts and practices of, quite frankly, propaganda all over the place. And it's just absurd and disgusting. And it just really, I don't know, it throws me in a pretzel, quite frankly, because, I used to think of that profession, the reason why I chose it is that there was a lot of strong people who were smart, that would always do the right thing, who believed in the things that I believe in. Dynamism, fairness, equality, liberty, and most importantly, integrity. But that's not the case, particularly in media. It's a shit show of lies. And it's a cross-bred hybridization between politics and communication of these platforms. And, Tucker Carlson, who I'm now going to call Fucker, Fucker Carlson, is just a swarmy pig. I mean, he's disgusting, the stuff that he's involved with. And, and I just hassle him all the time on Twitter, and I just say, you're a POS. And really, quite frankly, everybody at Fox. But most notably that guy, because just the insane revelations and reality of being hand-delivered 47,000 hours of Capitol footage of the insurrection, so he and his team can cherry pick and tell a story that they want to tell to create division and further, exploit very naive people that are like, oh, forget the fact of all the stuff that we've seen the whole time and all of the evidence that's come through, not to mention police officers that got killed in, a shooting and all of the other insane things, not to mention, the proclamations to hang. It's not funny to hang, the Speaker of the House and the Vice President. I mean, and to reconcoct that in a way that's like, everything is just such an abomination, and it's literally just like a magician's trick. And there's millions of people that will buy this shit. How stupid do you have to be so fucking moronic to buy that shit? But here's the thing. The same thing is happening slightly different ways, but with regards to what it is that I've been revealing to you and what's important and why I'm asking you to join me on a tidal wave populist crusade to purge corruption. Because what I'm telling you is all of the obfuscation, which means to lie, hide the flag, and to make sure you don't understand how things work. And so, for example, I prefaced yesterday in my truth bomb that Rachel Maddow, Miss Once a Week, $30 million a year goddess of MSNBC, once again self-proclaiming that she doesn't really understand financialization in this story and the banks and everything else, which was very revealing. But her guest, who does know all this stuff, Elizabeth Warren, her whole pitch was, oh my God, what we're reacting to and what's going on in the meltdown of, SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, and Silvergate Bank, and of course, Signature Bank in New York, are all bank runs because of deregulation through through Donald Trump. I swear to God. Let me just touch upon the first part of it. Donald Trump was the king rat of the swamp. Okay, you remember he told everybody he was going to clear the swamp. The first thing he did was put the swamp back into positions of power. It was government of government Sachs, Goldman Sachs at that time. Okay, and guess what? That was no different than what fucking Obama did. All right, Mr. Change, believe change we can believe in. Put all the top dogs in the position to clean up the 2008 great financial crisis for the rich, or themselves, or the top 0.001%, like vulture motherfuckers that they are, and that's what I've been unfolding this whole time. But going back to my point about Trump and Dodd-Frank, for example, and I got a lot of action on this on Twitter last night as well. Elizabeth Warren was telling Rachel Maddow that it's like, this happened because of Donald Trump deregulating in 2018. Well, meanwhile, there were I think, let me get my numbers right on this. I think there were 16 Democratic senators and 32 House Democrat senator, House of Representatives reps, right, congressional reps that were Democrats that supported the bill also. And in addition to that, it turns out that none other than Barney Frank. He was on the board of directors at Signature Bank, and he was actually, as a lobbying effort, trying to water down the regulation of his own signature legislation. How funny is that he wound up at Signature Bank, right? And so here's Elizabeth Warren grandstanding after President Biden was grandstanding that, we're going to do everything we can to protect the safety and soundness of the banking system, which led me to go fucking ballistic. Because, again, the circumstances of what happened at SVP are different than what happened at Silvergate, that are slightly different from what I understand that happened at Signature. But, we already have the FDIC, which insures deposits up to $250,000. And what was coming out of this madness, and what I've been vectoring in on in my centerpiece to what it is that I've been telling you the whole time, and why I went absolutely ballistic the last couple of days, is that you end up with this emergency bailout by the full faith and credit of the United States that allows all of these VCs, these venture capitalists, to retain all of their stupid decisions, which they may have not been involved with fraud. We don't know, but we're seeing some strange things that Goldman Sachs was involved in all manner of shape or form. And I don't want to go down that thread at the moment because it could take forever to try to deconstruct that. But not surprised. But also, not just the VCs, but like private equity guys. And private equity guys are the worst of the worst. And we're talking about assets. Again, I mentioned to you yesterday that I think 60% of the depositors had basically pulled their money to the tune of like $40+ billion in the span of a day. I mean, that's extraordinary. Talking about a bank run, but most of it was predicated on kind of what's been going on, of course, with the Federal Reserve and hiking interest rates and the way that works with long-term bond yields and that sort of thing. But last night I was thinking to myself, okay, well. Jesus Christ, these are big banks, the second largest bank, run in the history of the United States, which is extraordinary. And I found out last night, interestingly enough, I think the largest one I thought was Lehman Brothers, but it turns out it was the one out of, I can't think of it, that Chase purchased. They were out of Seattle. Anyway, it'll come back to me in a minute, but they were the largest one. But it's like, okay, so you got Janet Yellen and President Biden and the entire financial system rallying around on a Sunday to like do everything it can to make sure that it's going to be able to make the depositors whole. These depositors, these venture capitalists that have billions of dollars in this bank that had absolutely horrendous management. And when that happens in a capitalist structure, based on all of the ways that banks have to operate and people are making money and everything else, and they read the tea leaves and they're following what their brokers are telling them and what, the Federal Reserve is doing and all that sort of thing. That's a part of capitalism. Okay? So it's risk reward, and if something goes haywire and you go south and you get freaking slammed, oh well. Okay? I mean, that's literally the definition of capitalism, but that's not what we have. Which again, say it with me. I want millions of you to say it with me. Our system isn't a democracy. Our system, actually, our economic system isn't capitalism. It's a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal system, syndicate, that uses socialism to backstop its fucking late stage capitalism, rape hysteria that it's been getting away with, and now people are starting to pick up on it. But here's the thing: nobody's talking about what I've been talking about the whole damn time that I actually knew about in 2012. Okay, which I got from the Levy study. And lo and behold, the way my life trajectory went, it was funny. I knew that the CEOs and the board of the banks and everything else, I knew that they were all up to no good. I didn't know exactly how they were doing what they did until one day, miraculously, on a Sunday morning, I happened to catch who became ultimately the most important person in my life, a gentleman by the name of William K. Black, who was on a show with Bill Moyers, and suddenly he started talking about things that I was like, what did he just say? And from that moment forward, it changed my life, because down that path, I discovered exactly what the formula was for how the system works, which is called control fraud. And there's so much more to it. But during that same time, I was like, wait a second, I found out about this emergency stimulus behind the scenes in this FOIA request that started with Bernie Sanders that ultimately led to this guy, Mark Pittman, who was a journalist at Bloomberg. And then there was trillions of dollars that had been backdoored to the system, and to buy what? And then there was these proclamations, for example, from Hank Paulson, who was the former Secretary of the Treasury at that time, who was the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, and he kept saying, "I'm going to threaten to use the bazooka." This on top of Timothy Geithner saying that the American people are going to be foam on the runway for the crashing financial system. Concurrently, at that time, we had Occupy Wall Street, and I got involved with that to make my first documentary. But I was loosely aware of some investigations, but I didn't know the details because media completely dropped the ball on all of this stuff. And we wound up with the Federal Crisis Inquiry Commission that ended up telling me a lot of what the story was. And then ultimately, we'd have further downstream these bank settlements that I prefaced yesterday that laid out everything that I'm telling you. And then we had the national mortgage settlement that lays out everything that I'm telling you, but none of it fixed the problem. It just further empowered the corruption to basically bury tens of millions of more, including myself, illegally. And that's the thing that got me the whole time. I kept thinking to myself, because again, I've said to you folks a lot, and I'll try to make this point as clear and concise as I can. I am a capitalist by my profession. But I'm not a capitalist as in I'm going to stroke and steal and lie and deceive and do all of these things and exploit and everything else. I'm a producer, so I'm a collaborator. So I find people that are very good at what they do. I find money for projects that we try to go, make and take out to the marketplace, and hopefully the return on investment justifies being able to tell the truth that should have incredible value. But ironically, it doesn't, because of what I'm telling you. Lies are what everybody buys. And, going back to the nature in the grand symphony of where we are at the moment in context to where I've come from the entire time, was that, just like I accidentally discovered William K. Black, that changed my life and reconfigured my mindset to understand all of the inversion, perversion, machinations of just hyena deception. And ultimately, then because I understood that the Federal Reserve was backdooring because of the stuff that I just mentioned, particularly because of Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders ends up saying in the 2016 presidential election that Wall Street's business model is fraud, but he never gives you the detail. And I'm discovering the detail all along. And lo and behold, because of my trajectory in my pathway, I wind up actually getting to know and becoming not just knowledgeable of his work, but the person who actually was the guy who spearheaded the investigation, a gentleman from University of Kansas City, Missouri, that ended up going on to the trying to think of the college, Bard College, with the Levy Institute. His name's Randall Wray, which revealed all. And I'm looking around at media this whole time like, wait a second, where's the New York Times on this? Where's the Washington Post? Where's the Chicago Tribune? Where is the Miami Sun Herald? Where is the Los Angeles Times? They're not telling us this story. As I started to piece it all together, and miraculously, I found a budget, and luckily enough to do it. And I got to know people all around the country, and I found answers that were extraordinary. But then what happened was eventually we got our first round of work out there, the con, www.thecon.tv, that basically revealed all the shit that manifested the world's largest criminal conspiracy and cover up in history, but I've got 300 hours more than on the sidelines about millions of people who got basically bulldozed in the courts using illegal documentation fabrication to the tune of millions, using the system to do it. And nobody's been able to go there. And so, for example, everybody's now experts or talking about or trying to find answers in all sorts of media, mainstream media, spinning, lying. So, for example, as bad as Tucker Carlson was, I just told you that the Dems are blaming deregulation on Donald Trump when it was President Clinton who really deregulated with the President Working Group, which was Robert Rubin and Larry Summers and this guy Levitt, who was the SEC chairman at the time, and Alan Greenspan, of course, who was our chair of the Federal Reserve. And all of these guys blew up, regulation of derivatives particularly. And so I think the housing collapse was somewhere in the 5.7 trillion range. I think maybe it was 4.7 trillion. But then it was, of course, the derivatives that was like 600 to 800 trillion. And by the way, that's about to happen again. Even worse, because we're right in the midst of an everything bubble. And what's going on with these bank runs could potentially trigger this. And I'll finish up with this. So last night, as I went to bed thinking about slam dancing corruption, the great Michael Hudson appears with, in this podcast that I pay attention to, which is funny because this guy is full on far left, pretty much communist, but he's a genius intellect. And I watch him and I love what he has to say because I think historically he's pretty much on the money. I don't agree with all the things downstream exactly because there's other stuff that we can talk about ideologically downstream, but ultimately he had on the economist that I trust above all else, outside of William K. Black, who also, besides being a criminologist, is one of the top economists that I know. But Michael Hudson, the economist, not the journalist, who is an also amazing human being. Michael Hudson, the economist. First of all, it was his 84th birthday yesterday. So if anybody watches this all the way through and if it happens to be Michael Hudson, happy birthday. I mean, the guy is a powerhouse. And he just lays out everything and validates everything that I've been telling you this whole time. But, far more advanced and far more technical and far more, quite frankly, poetic and genius in terms of, all of the different increments that lay out the fact that you just live in a corporate fascist system undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses socialism to bail out fucking the mob, okay? That they're lying, stealing, and cheating and destroying the American dream and the integrity of law, and they're using the courts to do it, and the Federal Reserve to use the full faith and credit of the United States to put trillions in their pocket for fucking everybody else. If that doesn't piss you off, I don't know who else will. And so the maelstrom of all of this stuff, right? And by the way, Michael Hudson was, referring to the work of William K. Black. That legitimizes me because my work is William K. Black's work because that's what we've revealed. And ultimately, where we are, sitting at this moment is, I was at the gym yesterday and I look up on the television screen, and lo and behold, on Erin, whatever the heck her name, the cute, perky woman who came out of Goldman Sachs at one point, who I think is in the time block at I think she's probably 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm not a big fan of hers. I think she's a moron, but she's, following the story of Silicon Valley Bank, and lo and behold, I see Lloyd Blankfein's face on the screen. And she's talking to him about bank runs. Are you fucking kidding me? I mean, this is like Tucker Carlson recreating everything that we saw with our own eyes about the insurrection on January 6th. And she's doing kind of like, hey, let's go talk to the guy who created the ultimate bank run, if you want to know the truth. Literally, Lloyd Blankfein and Goldman Sachs created the shorts. And by the way, I should get that point out because I have evidence, and this goes to my point about, what's it called? The Big Short a couple of days ago. I think I might even made this, the Big Short connection on Sunday. But, the real Big Short was not the stuff that they showed you in the movie starring Brad Pitt and Christian Bale, which was a magnificent movie, which basically focused on Michael Burry. But to put it into perspective, Michael Burry ends up walking with $498 million on his Big Short with his hedge fund out of Silicon Valley. But The real Big Short was a guy by the name of John Paulson, not to be confused with Hank Paulson, who had a huge hedge fund with, well, it was kind of a middle of the road hedge fund at the beginning, but with a guy by the name of Paolo Pellegrini, and they started snuffing stuff out, which actually they started snuffing stuff out based on information that a guy by the name of, oh my God, it'll come to me in a second, a guy I interviewed who I love, who I could just call up on the phone right now, who actually, figured all this stuff out early with Fannie and Freddie and told the Federal Reserve and told, the New York Bank Federal Reserve Chairman, Tim Geithner, everything that was going on. That got the information to Moody's that ended up he could have been the Big Short, but he chose not to because that's not what he does. But ultimately, these other guys, out there, particularly John Paulson, was paying attention. As it turns out, Moody's literally did lay out what was going on in the mortgage-backed securities thing, I think as early as 2006, 4 or 5, which was a warning that these guys started picking up on. Anyway, long story short, the Big Short was really these guys, John Paulson working with Goldman Sachs, and to put it in perspective, they walked with $20 billion. John Paulson walked with $20 billion when the world blew up. And guess what? He was hand-picking the mortgages to short through Greenpoint, which was a vertical lender that I have on camera, that they actually knew the worst of the worst liars loans that they packaged in these mortgage-backed securities, that then they knew when they were going to freaking, pull the pin on the grenade sort of thing. But it was a nuclear grenade. And then ultimately, they walk with $20 billion, and fast forward 10, 11 years, and I think it was last summer that the Supreme Court was hearing cases from literally the Arkansas Teachers Pension Union and the pipe fitters and steel unions of the United States that were suing Goldman Sachs for this very thing, even though they didn't have this evidence that I have. And the Supreme Court wouldn't allow discovery, and they just basically laid out this blanket sort of decision that's like, look, nobody can expect which way the wind's going to blow. Wait a second. First of all, Goldman Sachs and all of these other guys are the types of, if you invest with these investment banks, their underwriting and their due diligence is why you invest. But as it turns out, and this goes back to Matt Taibbi's, vampire squid, and they used to say they like to rip off the face of their clients because they were playing both sides, which is the Big Short, which should be illegal, but it wasn't. But the guy that was responsible for all of that is a dude by the name of Lloyd Blankfein, who happens to be on CNN talking about bank runs last night. So fill in your favorite lie, right? Tucker Carlson in the insurrection, Rachel Maddow in that, Donald Trump's responsible for deregulation. Or CNN and Goldman Sachs, the former chairman of Goldman Sachs, who created the largest bank run in history because they knew exactly the collateral that Bear Stearns had, and they ultimately knew exactly what AIG wasn't holding, and they pulled the pin and they set the run off. That basically buried Bear Stearns, that ultimately led to Maiden Lane and the United States government in 2009 pulling off this emergency stimulus that they put Larry Fink and BlackRock at the apex to administer. And that's why BlackRock and Larry Fink owns the world, because they could choose who the winners and the losers were going to be. And meanwhile, all of, media doesn't have a fucking clue. And if they do, they chose not to tell the story, because they want the system to thrive at your expense. And so at the outset of this thing, when I told you that I'm in kind of a Zen frame of mind, it's because I'm the only one who has all the answers and who's willing to carry to the distance to the people, the American people. And the only way I'm going to really be able to do that is if I have your buy-in, man. I'm not looking for a lot of money. I'm not looking for this to be painful to you. If you're poor, it could be hard to come up with $13. Okay? If you can't do that, do me a favor. Check out everything I put out online for free, and then share the word to 13 people. Will you do that? Because the reason you're fucked up more than anything else is because the system put you there. Okay? It really did. And it will continue to do that until you wise your ass up. Now to everybody else, if you happen to have a lot of money and you completely buy into what I'm saying and you know what I'm doing, hey, any contribution is great, but I would rather you pay us $13 or contribute $13 to show your commitment, because this is a numbers game and it's about momentum. We have to get millions of people in the fold, so that if I had $13 contributions from 1,300 people, that gives us $16,900. That gets us a chance to get organized. If we can get that, we can get to, let's say, call it 13,000 contributors. If we get that, we have $169,000. I get to do a lot more things. If we get north of that, my end game is, consider me, for those of you who are old enough to remember this, there was a cat by the name of Bob Geldof that put together Live Aid. He was a former lead singer of the Boomtown Rats, a guy from Ireland, super cool guy. And then I think he went fucking cataswampus downstream after Live Aid. Maybe got too much got to his head. I've read some crazy things. But ultimately, the long and the short of it is that, he put together the whole magic of bringing all of the world together to elevate, hunger in India or Africa to, try to make a difference and an impact. And he did for a long time. Okay? What I'm trying to do is to do a barnstorming revival tour with the information I have that shows what the United States is supposed to be, what the United States was, with all its faults as well, but with also some of the great, achievements. In fact, many of the amazing achievements that we've had, but that then get us into the situation that I'm talking about, and to reveal to you what all of these liars, I mean, literally, look, again, what we've done is extraordinary, okay? And I want to finish off with this because this is really fucking funny because of what I just told you about Goldman Sachs. So the federal government budgets somewhere to the tune of $70 billion a year for the FBI, the DOJ, the SEC, different groups like the OCC, and all of the institutions that are supposed to regulate to make sure that the financial system operates with safety and soundness, and that we hold fraud accountable. I mean, the entirety of the Securities and Exchange Commission was created after the Great Depression to be the cops on the beat for finance, because we have to have finance. You have to have finance, but you don't have to finance running the show that morphs into this incredible Borg that hijacked the United States based on corruption, because these are all devious bastards. They're at the helm of this, and many of you people recognize that they're sociopaths. But look, the entirety of the system, $70 billion, buried this. Okay? Because of political appointees. Obama came in, puts Eric Holder as the Attorney General of the United States, and he covers this whole thing up. And there's so much more to it. Check out my truth bombs. I've got thousands of hours that reveal this stuff. And same with the con. And ultimately, which leads us to Trump, it's all a continuation. And then you've got media. Literally, I don't know what the resources are for the New York Times, but it's in the billions. And then ultimately, mainstream media from Fox and CNN and MSNBC, billions. And their business model is to lie to you. I'm the dude that's got the truth that could set tens of millions of people free. You're in bondage, dude. I don't fancy myself Moses, but it's a little ironic. And the Red Sea could part right now with momentum. We need to get literally millions of people involved to be able to champion the truth, to break through this noise. Because the only way that system is going to listen to us is if we overwhelm it, just like it has overwhelmed us. For better or for worse, that's why I feel zen. And by the way, I'm talking the top journalists in the world, the only one that matters. And I told you I was going to finish up with the story about Goldman Sachs. So with Goldman Sachs, when I was making the con, I got some paychecks. I got some wire transfers to make the con from Goldman Sachs. It was a total Robin Hood. Robin Hood? Yeah, Robin Hood. Sort of stealing from the rich scenario. But I wasn't stealing. I was part of being a producer who I got somebody who was heavily involved with Goldman Sachs, and they ended up paying me to reveal the truth. But then again, they must have gotten word about it because they have a lot more power than I do, and they suppressed us. And Goldman Sachs won, BlackRock won, the street won. The fucking assholes who are deviant, sociopath, lying, stealing, cheating villains. And this whole thing is Gotham, man. This whole thing is Gotham, and I guess, sorry to compare myself to Moses, but I'll compare myself to Batman too, right? I mean, look, guys, I'm just a dude who did the work. My name is Patrick Lovell, and I'm trying to create a tidal wave populist crusade to purge corruption so that you, me, and everyone you can see except for the Nazis, to build a movement for democracy, sustainability, and liberty and justice for all. It's what I call the Clean New Deal. Onwards and upwards.